This past year, I decided to get back into building and collecting different Lego sets. As a kid, Lego was something that I always really enjoyed, getting to build a new set with my dad every so often and then play with it for what seemed like endless amounts of time. Much like a lot of people though, I found increasingly less time to enjoy the hobby with things like work, school, and other interests taking up the majority of my time. Whenever I returned to the hobby, I realized things were so much different than they used to be. It used to be rather simple. You'd build the set and you'd pull it apart to later use to build something else. It could have been an alternate build in the instructions, one shown on the back of the box, or it might have been something you came up with entirely on your own, unrelated to the original theme. These days, many sets come lacking basic bricks or thrive on a third-party IP, with many in-house themes being tied to an animated show. For those of us yearning to return to a simpler time like our childhood when the sets were simpler too, things just aren't looking great. So where did things go wrong? And did they go wrong? Whatever happened to the Lego themes we all grew up with? Where are they now? Did they die? In this video, I'm going to talk about different eras in Lego history, the three main classic play themes, and look at how they changed over the time with the company. In order to see how we got to the point we're at now though, we need to start from the very beginning. It all started with the birth of the perfect building brick designed to stay together whenever stacked by clutching power, allowing the builder the opportunity to play with their creations after completing the build. While in its early years, the bricks were sold as basic bricks, Lego models sold in kits were designed to provide the builder with parts to build homes and cars. Next was the addition of figures, meant to populate these scenes people were now able to create. These figures were different from what we have today, lacking facial expressions and moving limbs. Still, they gave everyone a glimpse of what the Lego brand would become in the future. The faceless characters remained for a few years and were commonplace, until we finally met the smiling, articulated minifigure that we are used to today. These characters, fitting the scale of kits being released at the time, brought new life into them. With the introduction of these minifigures, Lego also released a variety of new themes. These themes are what later would be known as the classics: town, space, and castle. Representing the past, present, and future, these sets unleashed everyone's imagination. Most sets had no more than 250 pieces, with even the largest set having no more than 767 pieces. There were technical sets that were released for advanced builders, but they didn't have the feeling of town, space, and castle. In these worlds, everyone was happy. Over the following years, we saw these themes develop into fully fleshed out universes. Our classic themes added things such as factions, open conflict, and even story sub-themes that revolved around these conflicts. This era of conflict-based story themes coincided with the ushering in of a new era from the Lego brand, an era defined by licensed themes. It started with the almighty Star Wars, followed with Harry Potter, then came sports, and even Spider-Man. In due time, some of the licensed themes came to displace in-house themes such as Lord of the Rings and Indiana Jones. The success Lego has been seeing from these new themes was sure to change their direction and provide inspiration for their future releases. Most of the 2000s were spent on these third-party IPs and story-based themes derived from the classics. While I do not know much about Bionicle, so I will not speak on it in depth, I do think that it had some inspiration on the next era Lego brand would enter. In the 2010s, Lego had begun releasing new in-house themes with a tie-in animation. While LEGO had been dabbling in animation since 1987 with Edward and Friends, which showcased the Fabuland theme, this time things were different. Instead of just showcasing sets that were already released, LEGO was creating entirely new themes with entirely new stories for these animated shows. One of the first animations of this era was a short movie for Cartoon Network for LEGO Atlantis the movie in 2010. Ninjago, though, is without a doubt the strongest of all their animated series that were released in this era. Their initial run, like most sets, was meant to last for around 3 years, but 13 years later we have the Dragons Rising line continuing on the original's success. Along the way, other themes with animated series based on them have been released, such as Dreams, Legends of Chima, and Nexo Knights. LEGO Friends, which debuted in 2012, involving years of market research, was closely tied into an animated series with designers and scriptwriters working together on final product decisions. Even LEGO City Today, which is an extension of the Classic Town theme, has seen an animated series providing the theme with a storyline. We see through this today that our themes are quite removed from the original castle, space, and city themes. We're even very far past the time of the 2000s with conflict-based story themes that were derived from the classic sets. Our current in-house themes of City, Friends, Ninjago, and Dreams are all tied in with their own animated series, while the remaining play themes, Disney, Minecraft, Star Wars, Harry Potter, and even Speed Champions, are all tied in to external licenses. I know there are so many more, but that is just to name a few. Current themes show some ties to our original themes, but they're not concrete. There's no doubt in my mind that there are recent sets in Ninjago and Monkey Kid containing elements of castle, space, and even pirates. While we know now that licenses plus tied-in animations changed the entire landscape of LEGO, we still need to answer what actually happened to these classic themes. How did they evolve over time? What is their legacy like? Let's start with my favorite, Castle. The Castle theme started in 1978 and went through multiple different eras on its own while the company was growing along with it. The era that is considered the classic era of Castle lasted from 1978 to 1983, predating sub-themes and factions. 375 Castle, often called the Yellow Castle, is the most well-known set from this time. Following Classic Castle in 1984, LEGO released the first castle sets that had more realistic castles, knights, and colors in order to depict the Middle Ages more accurately than the classic castle sets from the late 1970s and early 1980s. In 1984, due to the focus on additional realism, we saw the birth of our first two factions in Castle. Although the term Black Falcons wasn't explicitly and internationally used to market one of the factions in its original incarnation, LEGO later picked up the term in its own marketing to refer to the earlier theme. As with the Black Falcons, our second faction was never officially named for some time, although in 1992, the United States and Canadian catalog officially established this second faction as the Crusaders. Continuing until 1992, Castle remained much the same, adding more factions into the mix, which was kind of our first look into what LEGO would do with sub-themes in the future. 1987 saw the addition of a very loved faction in Castle, the Forestmen, starting with the iconic set 6066. Next up came the addition of the Black Knights, which were based on earlier, non-theme affiliated sets. We didn't see the faction officially named until 1992, but sets as early as 1988 were considered to be a part of the faction. Lastly, we have the Wolf Pack Renegades, who were a group of bandits in Castle, with only 3 sets being made, making it the smallest of all our factions. While everything was based in reality at the time, 1993 saw the addition of our first fantasy faction. This is a major turning point for Castle, as many following sub-themes would have some sort of fantasy element to them. The first fantasy faction was the Dragon Masters, led by a wizard and featuring a dragon figure. After Dragon Masters came the Royal Knights, which was the first LEGO sub-theme to include skeletons. Again, something that would become prominent in later sub-themes. Thrown in between all this was the release of the Dark Forest faction, basically a reboot of the Forest Men. LEGO didn't take too long a break from fantasy though, and released our final faction considered a sub-theme, the Fright Knights. Fright Knights delve deeper into the supernatural fantasy aspect, featuring black dragons with fire-colored wings, creepy trap-filled red and black castles, crystal balls, and Willa the Witch, a dark sorceress who was the real power behind Basil's throne. In 1998, we began to see LEGO straying away from the faction-based sub-themes and into their story-based conflict sub-themes. There was a weird period in 1998 to 2000 between all of that, where they were releasing the Ninja line, which, in contrast to the previous fantasy sub-themes, took its influence from a more realistic starting point and was set in mountainous Japan with medieval buildings similar to other castle sets. After Ninja came the first Knights Kingdom, not to be confused with the 2004 Knights Kingdom line. This first run of Knights Kingdom was our first conflict-based sub-theme in Castle, centered around the lions and the bulls. This sub-theme had many small sets with minifigures, and was the first Castle sub-theme to feature 2 female minifigs, Queen Leonora and Princess Storm. Knights Kingdom 2, as we will call it for sanity's sake, is a revamped version of the previously mentioned sub-theme, featuring larger action figure-like characters as well as more colorfully attired minifigures in the traditional sets. Knights Kingdom chronicles the legends of the Kingdom of Mortia, a fantasy world, and the adventures that take place within it. The main characters are the knights of the opposing factions. This was the main offering from the Castle line from the years of 2004 until 2006. In 2007, Castle went back to its roots. Well, sort of, by rebooting the line with a sub-theme again called only Castle. While trying to recreate the original feeling, this reboot didn't have the same allure as classic Castle, as it was largely based on fantasy like sets from the 90s. Sets in this themes featured orcs, trolls, and dwarves to add to the medieval fantasy theme. The last sets of this incarnation of Castle were released in 2009 and were replaced by a new environment, Kingdoms, in 2010. Kingdoms is the name of the sub-theme that was released June 2010 and replaced the fantasy-based Castle theme that had been in place since 2007. Kingdoms departs from the concept of a fantasy world inhabited by undead, orcs, and dwarves, and returns to a more realistic world modeled after the European Middle Ages. In Kingdoms, there are 2 human factions pitted against each other. This sub-theme, like the fantasy-era Castle theme of 2007, includes peasants and civilians, instead of concentrating solely on military factions. The Kingdoms theme was discontinued in 2012, replaced ultimately by the licensed Lord of the Rings franchise sets, which were much more popular at the time. LEGO tried in 2013 to again reboot the line under the Castle moniker, replacing the previous Kingdoms line. It ended up being a very short-lived sub-theme with only 5 sets released in late 2013 and 2 battle packs released in early 2014. This was ultimately the last we would see of the official Castle theme. Although having not released a new line of medieval-themed sets since the end of the second reboot in 2013, LEGO has released under other lines several standalone sets which are stylistically consistent with many of the previous Castle themes. They have even brought classics, such as the Lion's Knight Castle, back in a new, updated form. For me, I just wish they would bring Castle back as an official theme, as some of my fondest memories come from the line. Ultimately, it seems licenses such as Lord of the Rings just became more worthwhile investments for LEGO. We now know the history of Castle, the path it took to becoming a former line, but what happened to the other two? Let's take a look into LEGO Space next, saving town for the very end of the video. To summarize, LEGO Space is a science fiction oriented theme which focuses on astronauts, space colonization, spaceships, and extraterrestrial life. It is one of the oldest and most extensive themes in LEGO history, consisting of over 300 individual sets. Before its official release, there were a couple sets predating the standard minifigure, so those sets aren't technically a part of the theme that started in 1978 along with Castle and Town. In their earliest stages in 1978, space sets consisted only of ships and basic wheeled vehicles. But as the number of science fiction inspired designs grew, the basic pattern of ground buggies, walking robots, spaceships, and bases developed. Sets were still simplistic and included minifigure pilots steering their spacecraft with steering wheels and rocket engines as simple cones affixed to fence pieces. The figures featured visorless helmets and often no in-flight pilot protection other than a spacesuit. The first minifigures released in this theme wore either a red or white spacesuit, with yellow space minifigures debuting a year later. Following the same pattern as Castle, we begin to see multiple factions being added to the theme after the end of the classic era in 1986. In 1987, LEGO introduced Blacktron, and the new sub-theme based on space exploration was given the name Futuron. Blacktron was a major step up from the rather clunky design values of classic space. Maintaining the same logo aesthetic plus color scheme from the later years of classic space, it updated on things like the minifigures and modularity. Blacktron were considered to be the bad guys at the time, which led us to the introduction of another space theme, Space Police. This would be the first time that LEGO had a bad guy, good guy, and civilian faction all under one theme. 1990 ushered in another new space sub-theme, this time a group of sets centered around magnets. After the introduction of Space Police, Mtron was introduced as a repair and rescue faction, the space equivalent of a fire brigade. However, for the American market, the faction was depicted as a mining and exploration faction. This sub-theme added another good guy faction into the mix, as they were commonly seen in catalogs assisting Futuron. Marking the end of an era, these were officially the last sets to be produced under the Legoland banner before LEGO began branding their sets as LEGO System. Similar to Castle, LEGO over the lifetime of space latched onto their better performing and fan favorite themes, rebooting Blacktron in 1991. Fans commonly referred to this theme as Blacktron 2, but it was called Blacktron Future Generation at the time. The following year, Space Police was also revived, becoming Space Police 2, to oppose the new Blacktron. Both of these sets were more visual continuations of the previous themes, with little updates here and there, instead of ushering in something entirely brand new. An interesting fact is that Space Police 2 was the first space theme to replace the standard smiley face minifigure head with a more complex print. In this case, that print would include fringes of hair and a mounted microphone. From 1993 to 1997, we saw LEGO swap our old beloved factions out for new updated factions to fill their roles. In 1993, Ice Age 2002 took over the civilian role from M-Tron. Based on exploration on an ice planet, many of the vehicles featured new things such as skis. In 1994, Spyrius replaced Blacktron as the bad faction, with sets designed around spying and infiltration. This 9-set theme was often marketed as stealing from our next faction. Also, in 1994, Unitron took over the good guy role from the Space Police. Unfortunately for international fans, this was only available in the United States and Canada if you don't recognize the sub-theme. In 1996, LEGO returned to the white and transparent blue canopies of Futuron with the Explorians theme. The theme shares many similarities with the popular Star Trek TV series, with the faction's main focus being on exploration. Their robot figure's name being a play on Android, and the faction's insignia resembling Starfleet's insignia. Following in 1997, we have RoboForce, a 4-set sub-theme based around a faction named after the theme. Again, for international fans, this was only available in North America if you do not recognize it. In that same year, we also saw the introduction of UFO, a line that brought many new things to space. All of UFO's minifigures were very alien in nature, and the race featured 2 holy robot figures, and many of its spaceships used saucers or half saucers as elements. This was also the first theme to introduce what has since become a staple of LEGO system sets in general: large pieces meant to provide effects that would be difficult to achieve with traditional pieces. Insectoids, which was released in 1998, followed the same formula, introducing many new parts, a lot of them being insect-shaped. Taking our longest time between new sub-themes since the introduction of factions in 1987, LEGO brought us Life on Mars in 2001. Released around a time of increased curiosity about the Red Planet, this theme revolved around the concept of life forms that could possibly exist on Mars. This was the first theme to feature 2 types of minifigures: Martian aliens and human astronauts. The sets depict peaceful coexistence between the 2 species. The theme also introduced several new muted colors to the color palette, including sand green, sand blue, sand red, and sand purple. Many of these went on to become fan favorites. It took a whole 6 years before we saw our next sub-theme, another Martian-based one, when we saw Mars Mission release. Unlike Life on Mars, the aliens and humans were adversaries this time around, parroting the company's conflict-based model. Straying away from the science again, we saw another conflict-based sub-theme release. This time being a reboot of an iconic line, Space Police 3. Instead of being pitted up against human-like opponents, this was the first time that we saw the Space Police against monstrous-looking aliens. Again, in 2011, another conflict-based sub-theme released was Alien Conquest. Alien Conquest brought alien attackers to planet Earth for the first time and identified UFOs as aliens in saucer-shaped aircraft. This sub-theme was short-lived, with a limited run of sets being released before our final sub-theme, Galaxy Squad, was launched in 2013. Continuing the idea of conflict, Galaxy Squad features a team of intergalactic heroes and robot sidekicks trying to defeat an alien race of space bugs. This would be the last we see from the official space theme from LEGO for the past 11 years. While there is no longer any official theme for space, the idea of intergalactic exploration and space-themed vehicles is not entirely dead. Since the end of Galaxy Quest in 2013, we have seen plenty of one-off releases, such as 2014's NASA Curiosity rover. In 2017, we got sets like the Saturn V rocket, and currently on sale in 2024, we have the NASA Artemis launch system. In the past year, we've also seen a resurgence of the space branding being used on City, Friends, Technic, Classic, and Creator sets. There was also the re-release of the iconic Galaxy Explorer in 2022, referencing back to the classic era of LEGO Space. In conclusion, I wouldn't say that LEGO Space is dead by any means. It's just not as significant as it used to be. Licenses, in-house themes with tied-in animations, and themes such as icons have taken the spot as the company's top money makers, according to LEGO reports. I still have hope for an official theme from LEGO again, but I believe it would take them producing a show along with it, or just having great success with the rebranded space sets. Still, we see much more love currently for the space line than we do with Castle. I want to finish the video off with Town, which I do believe is still the most prevalent of the classic 3 themes. Town was introduced as an official theme in 1978, when the first minifigures were released as part of a reimagining of the Legoland range of sets, along with Space and Castle. The arrival of the minifigure was the most dramatic change introduced in 1978. At last, we were able to get some people to live in our town. Before this time, there have already been several LEGO sets that were centered around present-day town life. Some of these earlier sets coexisted in the first years of Town, but by 1980 had been discontinued. Originally, all Town life-related sets that were minifigure compatible were released directly under the Town theme. As we moved into the 1980s, things became a little different and more regulated, with all new vehicles released at the time being able to be occupied by a minifigure. Starting in 1980, new pieces were continuously being added into the mix and fleshed the theme out a tad bit more. We saw the addition of larger wheels, which allowed trucks to be differentiated in some form from smaller cars. 1981 saw the introduction of finger hinges, which allowed the builder to open the vehicle's roof to place their minifigure inside. A new element in 1993 was added that brought motorcycles into the mix, something very difficult to build realistically before this point. In 1984, a new system was introduced for the wheels on vehicles. A plate with small pins allowed us to click into wheels and have them easily swapped out in the future. This system remains the standard way to attach wheels today, although the range of plates with connectors has expanded over the years. Starting around 1985, an increasing number of town sets would be released as a part of different sub-themes that focused on specific aspects of town life. Apart from police and fire sets, there were a few recurring businesses in the 80s. These included petrol stations, repair shops, doctors' offices, hospitals, and trauma centers. We also started to see many more vehicles that could populate our cities, such as airports with planes, racing sports, and seaports. Logistics and mail services also began to make their presence felt. Initially, all these town sub-themes only involved everyday town life. With the advent of Launch Command, Divers, and Arctic, the setting was expanded beyond the scope of a simple town or city. Town was now about everything one could find on present-day Earth. Sub-themes like Paradisa brought entirely new things to the table with its color palette and minifigures featuring unique face prints differing from the classic smile. LEGO introduced a new 9-volt train system with power reaching the motor via metal rails and conductive wheels, just like a normal train set. The other tried and true sub-themes of LEGO Town from the 80s remain steadfast. Police, fire, harbor, leisure, and racing are all commonplace across the years. This trend continued onwards up until 1997, which brought some major changes. Most of the sets that involved Town's former core sub-themes, like police and firefighters, were released as part of Town Junior, and many of the new sub-themes, such as Rescue, Flight, or Paradisa, were discontinued outright. Town Junior featured especially simple building techniques and designs, but was ultimately succeeded by City Center in 1999. After City Center's discontinuation in 2001, Town was virtually non-existent. Town was brought back to life when it was renamed to World City in 2003. The new town involved police, firefighters, and coast guards, and was more action-oriented with no sets featuring construction sites or airports. City trains were also packaged under the World City title. In 2005, World City was renamed to what we now know as City. It featured the first construction vehicles released since the end of the City Center sub-theme. In the following years, more sets that were picking up Town's classic core sub-themes were released, including an airport, a hospital, and a harbor. Much like Town in 1985, City was now becoming everything one could find on present-day Earth. In 2009, the first ever LEGO System Farm was even released. Continuing into the future, we would see LEGO City release many sets revolving around the different elements they introduced in the past. We saw fire departments, police stations, train stations, different services, and even medical sets appear. 2011 changed City, when the theme took a turn, emphasizing storytelling in play. No longer did sets come with just a random criminal, but they came with speeding car chases, banks to be robbed, or even hideouts. There are a lot of adventure science sets produced by LEGO, also such as the spaceport, deep sea divers, and jungle exploration. Some of these sub-themes often reach close to science fiction, but provide great scope for storytelling. Then, in 2019, something odd happened. A LEGO City minifigure got a name. Freya McCloud is the fire chief in the animated series, LEGO City Adventures. At this point, the team behind LEGO City has taken a leaf out of the book from LEGO Friends, Ninjago, Monkey Kid, and Nexo Knights, designing sets around an animated series, having storyboarders and set designers in the same room to plot out the year's sets. Over the following years, we have had more and more characters revealed, not only through fire and police departments, but an increased cast of characters throughout the town. We can see now the focus of LEGO City has shifted from just presenting kids with a series of vehicles or headquarters for different organizations in the city to storytelling, with sets including multiple opportunities for dramatization. Be it fire, cops and robbers, the retail experience, hospitality, or exploring the world around us. If LEGO City is anything, it is constantly evolving and alive. The theme has been in the top-selling LEGO themes for at least the last decade. The city of today has come a long way since 1978, and I am sure it will continue to evolve and expand. Sets have become more sophisticated, both in their construction and storytelling, as the home of real-world LEGO stories. One thing is for sure, as long as the theme is around, there will be police cars and fire stations on the shelves. In conclusion, our beloved classic LEGO themes are shells of their former selves, except for the almighty city line. Things were continually expanding across all lines until sometime in the late 90s or early 2000s. It seems around that time that LEGO shifted these classic lines from just building experiences into story-driven experiences. In the 2010s, it looked that all but LEGO Town, which changed into City, was completely gone from store shelves to make room for licensed sets and in-house IPs. In recent years, we started seeing a resurgence of both Space and Castle after a long hiatus, though still no official reboot for either theme. It's unlikely we see another unless it aligns with LEGO's current ideals, pairing the theme with a TV show or it being a third-party licensed theme. It really is a shame, as I'm sure I'm not the only person out there who would love to see the return of these iconic LEGO lines. Thank you to everyone who watched this video. This was my first attempt at creating a documentary-style short film. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like the video, and if you're interested in more content like this in the future, subscribe. It means a lot to a channel as small as mine trying to grow, and it motivates me to put the time in to make videos like this for you guys. If you comment below, I always make an effort to respond to the comments. Stay crazy.